In a small cemetery in Clover, Virginia, lies the grave of a woman who died on October 4, 1951. Her name was Henrietta Lacks. By all accounts, she has been dead for over 70 years. But if you walk into almost any biomedical lab in the world from Tokyo to London, you will find her. She is alive in test tubes. She is alive in deep freeze storage. In fact, if you gathered all of her cells growing in labs right now, they would weigh more than 50 million metric tons. This is the story of the greatest medical miracle of the 20th century. But it is also a story of theft, racial injustice, and a legal battle over the question, who owns your body once you die? The year is 1951. The setting is the colored ward at Johns Hopkins Hospital. This was the era of segregation, and Hopkins was one of the few top hospitals that treated black patients. Henrietta comes in complaining of a knot in her womb. It's an aggressive cervical tumor. During her treatment, a surgeon named Dr. Lawrence Wharton, Jr. does something that was routine for the time, but shocking today. Without asking her permission, and without telling her, he slices to samples of tissue from her cervix, one from the tumor, one from healthy tissue. He sends them down the hall to Dr. George, a researcher obsessed with finding human cells that could survive outside the body. For decades, every cell line he tried to grow had died. But Henrietta's were different. They didn't just survive. They doubled every 24 hours. They were biologically immortal. He named them HeLa, taking the first two letters of her first and last name. While her cells thrived, Henrietta withered. She died in agony months later. She was buried in an unmarked grave. Her family was told nothing. Almost immediately, HeLa cells became a factory product. They were shipped around the world. They were used by Jonas Salk to test the polio vaccine. They were blasted with radiation to study the atomic bomb's effects. A multi-billion-dollar industry rose up around these cells. But back in Baltimore, the Lacks family was struggling. Henrietta's children couldn't afford health insurance. They had no idea that their mother's cells were being bought and sold for $25 a vial. The truth only came out in 1973 by accident. A researcher called the family, not to offer money or thanks, but because they wanted blood samples from the children to see if they had the immortal trait too. The family was confused and terrified. They thought doctors were testing them for the same cancer that killed their mother. The realization hit them hard. Part of her is still alive, and they are selling her. Why wasn't this illegal? In 1951, the concept of informed consent was practically non-existent in clinical practice. Federal protections for human research subjects wouldn't be solidified until 1991. The Lacks family was caught in a legal gray area. The most famous relevant case was Moore versus the Regents of the University of California in 1990. The Supreme Court of California ruled that a patient did not own their cells once they had been removed from the body. The court essentially argued that the value of the research outweighed the property rights of the individual. For years, the Lacks family received zero compensation. Public pressure mounted after the 2010 publication of Rebecca Skloot's best-selling book, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. The scientific community could no longer ignore the ethical stain of HeLa. In 2013, The NIH finally invited the Lacks family to the table, giving them control over who accesses the HeLa genome data. And finally, in August 2023, over 70 years after her death, the family reached a historic settlement with Thermo Fisher Scientific, a biotech giant that had profited from the cells. It was a landmark moment for what lawyers now call unjust enrichment. You cannot steal a body, make billions, and leave the family with nothing. Henrietta Lacks is the mother of modern medicine. If you have ever taken a vaccine or cancer medication, a part of her saved you. But her legacy is dual. She represents the triumph of science and the failure of ethics. She reminded the world that behind every sample number, there is a human being. Thanks for watching.